Welcome back to the Career Series, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to catch up with Kessner. Today, we have an aspiring educator, an environmental science graduate from UC Davis, a big advocate for the PhilAm community, and a friend I met through Faith and Dance. So go ahead if you're thinking about pursuing education, if you appreciate all your current or past teachers, or just love hearing stories about journeys of education. Go ahead, subscribe to the channel, download this episode. We both really appreciate it. Mona, thanks so much for catching up with me today.
Hi, yeah, it's good to be here. I was gonna introduce myself, and then you said Mona, so now I'm like, oh, I want
All
to say
good.
hi, I'm
No,
Mona.
that's perfect. So before we get into all that, for the people that don't know who you are, Mona, quick introductions. Who are you? What are you up to? We'll start off with that.
Sure. My name's Mona. So hello, everyone. I have a lot of background in community work, and I also did a lot of work in nonprofit environmental education before going and pursuing a teaching credential in life sciences, biological sciences.
Nice.
So that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Awesome. That's a lot of good stuff for talking with a fellow educator, right? I know that you teach sixth grade and I teach seventh grade, so a lot of good conversations today. But we'll dial back the clock a little bit, so we'll put you at that point where after you graduated, thinking about where you want to move forward. I know that you talked a lot about pursuing in different avenues. I know that you were part of an after-school program. I know that you were coordinators for other things. So talk about what led you to become a sixth grade teacher.
Oh, that's like, let me say, like, I don't, for those who aren't faith-based, I totally understand. It's okay. But I am going to say that was a God-driven roller coaster. So I went into, so just a little background, I went to UC Davis wanting to pursue a research, like a research kind of opportunity, a job, just starting some sort of career in the idea of like, the whole lab work, the idea of creating my own, like writing my own papers, becoming a tenured professor. That was like my dream. And then as soon as I got there, it really wasn't about the curriculum. I love the curriculum. I love the classes I took. It wasn't about the lab I worked with. I loved the lab I got into. Yeah. Dr. Cotto, he works with actually California Air Resource Board. I'm gonna shout him out. He's probably never gonna see this, but I adore that old man. You never know. I adore him though. But I really, when it came down to my senior year, I just didn't have the drive, and I kind of realized I just didn't have the passion for it. It was just, our lab was really small. I was the only person there. I kept falling asleep as I was collecting data and, you know, cleaning all the material and looking at data again. Yeah. And I couldn't see myself doing that over and over and over again. And some people can, and some people are excited about the slow increments of progress that science is. But I just, my personality, I just couldn't see myself staying in that world. So that was funny though, because I think that was my senior year. So I graduated kind of in this what now? Like this whole time I was gearing myself up for like research, lab, gonna work for California Air Resource Board, gonna stay up in NorCal. Now I'm moving down and I have no plan for myself. I have no idea what to do with this new Bachelor of Science, environmental science and management degree, emphasis in air quality. What the heck am I going to do with this in SoCal? So I kind of try to switch my gears to not exactly like lab work in terms of research, but just like lab work, like environmental compliance or just doing environmental consultation. But the doors weren't opening for me. I was probably applying for like half a year, and it was just a really intense transition. And I think I hit PostGrad Depression, definitely. Wow. Going through like very intense, it was manifesting like very aggressively too. Like I wasn't like sad. I was like really aggressive during that time. And bless my family for sticking with me, you know, and bless my friends for, you know, holding it down with me, even when I'm not like bubbly and happy all the time. But I just like remember feeling like a failure almost. Like I was asking God, because even, you know, me going to Davis was God driven. I wanted to go to different schools, but God was pointing this way to Davis. And I feel like I just felt at the time like I didn't understand what was God's purpose for me. I don't understand where I'm supposed to go.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
all these doors are closing, nothing's opening. I even got past an interview phase. They said they were taking me, but it was a contract environmental compliance job. And with those, they try and like 6 months, like kind of contract, and it's not always there. They were like, oh, you're a really good candidate. And before they like officially accepted me, the recruiter called me and said like, the job doesn't exist anymore. There's no funding. And I was just like, where is my luck, you know? Funnily enough, my brother is in the NPR, and he's like, oh, there's this like nonprofit, and I said, you should just check it out, see if they're hiring. And it happens to be this environmental nonprofit called Friends of the LA River.
Okay.
And I applied there. I also applied to another organization, but I'm not going to name them because I might still work with them. But they're great. It's just with the interview and the hiring process, it just wasn't working out. Whereas with Friends of the LA River, it did. And my boss really liked me, and she took me on as an intern. And a part of that internship was environmental education. So I would help her with like, well, I mostly helped around the office, but I also went on the field trips with her. So Friends of the LA River does like field trips with usually tier 1 schools, but they also have it's a weird way to say it. I think they changed the term now, but pay to play, where like you pay for the field trip as well. But basically I was going to the LA River, which is 10 minutes from my house, and I was getting to see like urban nature in both its like distinct beauty. And I say that because it's not like Yellowstone, you know, but it's still the heart of LA that people don't really know about. And I just fell in love with the idea of like being in nature and being with students. And with that position, I got to work with second graders to high schoolers, because we just work with different schools. Again, during this time, I was still looking for a job, but now I was like gearing towards, okay, maybe nonprofit is my style. I kind of really like this idea of working with community and outreach. It's definitely reminiscent of what I did in college. And then I kind of forgot exactly what happened. I got hired as a contract educator. And so I was like, oh, this is really nice. And I started the idea of teaching started tickling my brain. It's something I thought about in college, but I kind of always like, nah, like, I'm not going to teach. Like I don't really see myself as a teacher, you know? But then it's like, you know, with this job, it was tickling my brain. And so I started praying about it. I was like, God, what am I supposed to do? And there was like a very specific event that happened. And I always like when I hit very stressful events, I always feel like this need or this kind of like rift of change that pushes me to like do something. And so something happened that in my personal life, and it just made me just go like, you know what, like I'm gonna look into getting my master's or getting into a program. Like I'm just gonna look into it. Like let's do it. And so I just started like looking at the pros and cons of master's versus just getting my teaching credential out of the way. And I decided for me, I would just want to do my teaching credential and get it done, and then just go back for my master's another time. Now I don't know if that was the right decision, but I kind of, you know, I'm here, so that's the decision that's made. But yeah, and then I just went into that road of like, not GRE, but what did you take the CBEST, and then you take the CSET, but you take the CBEST first, and then you do, and Cal State LA's program, that's the program I'm in, works in urban diversity and like all of that, you know, pedagogy and jazz. So I really read into it, and I was like, oh, like this sounds like my jam. Like I really liked it. So I didn't even, and it was close by, you know, like Cal State LA is really close. Not like super close. I wouldn't say it's like LA River close, but it's pretty close enough. So it was like dope to like get into the program and just be with a bunch of like the really great thing I like about program is that it wasn't, so with Davis, sorry if I'm really running all over the place, but with Davis, I've never been in a place with so many, I haven't been in a place with so many white people. I'm from, you know, a part of LA that's, I won't say the name, but it's a lot of Armenians and Hispanics and Filipinos, a little bit of Korean, but not a lot of white people. And so going to Davis was a big culture shock for me. Even just like the minority, you know, community of color
Right.
makeup was a lot different than what I was used to.
Yeah.
And it was nice to kind of be, like a post-grad, I guess post-grad, it's like credential program,
Right.
but a program that in higher ed that is from people who have lived in similar neighborhoods like me or have like
Nice.
very diverse experiences from
Right.
LA and are seeking to teach from healing and transformative justice the way I am. And it was very rich for me to like I think one
Definitely.
of my classrooms, like we still have a group me and we still check in on each other. We have professors in it.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's how I kind of got into like teaching itself. And then how I got into my position was also God driven because I applied and then I got scared. So I withdrew my application,
Wow.
but I really needed a science teacher. So I was eating with a friend at the time and the principal called me and he said, "Hey, I heard from HR that you withdrew your application. Why did you do that?" And I said, "Oh, I'm nervous. I'm still in my
What?
program. I don't know if I can be a teacher." And he's like, "No, no, no, no. Just try our school out. Just try it out.
Wow.
Just do a demo, come in." And the
Yeah.
principal really liked me. And that's how now I'm here as a great science teacher. Second semester, first full year.
Wow.
Long road, but I guess the point I wanted to make was it really wasn't in my plans at all. And it just was a lot
Mm-hmm.
of like events that were kind of like, "Oh, Mona, here you go.
Right.
This is the way you're going."
No, that's awesome because there's a lot of things I like from your story when it comes to finding your place where you are now. I guess I'll backtrack a little bit too, right? Thinking
Mm-hmm.
of my interactions and my experiences and our relationship that we had in college, I always knew you as the most bubbliest, crazy person, right, on the dance team, but just in general in the spaces and the communities that you were a part of. And so I always knew that whatever you were going to pursue, it had to match your personality because you had a one of a kind personality. So just starting off with that. And I love how you talked about your where your faith took you into this space of teaching or education and the road that you went on, because I love how you mentioned that you thought you had an idea of what you want to pursue in environmental counseling or consulting, and that's kind of the image or the idea that you wanted for yourself post grad. But what really comes to my mind is when we lean into our faith or when we lead into God's work, he closes one door, but he opens up a better one, right? And so
Mm,
we initially thought
mm.
was good for us or what we really initially wanted, sometimes it just doesn't align with what God has for us, and that's completely fine. It's how do we recognize it and how do we adjust to that and how do we come into terms with giving up what we had was an idea for ourselves and ultimately the idea what God had or what God had for us. And so that's what I think about when I hear your story of what you wanted with your degree. I know that must have been hard navigating postgraduate because I definitely was in a place like that too, right? What
Mm,
do I want to do or what should I be doing with my degree in science, right? And a
mm-hmm.
lot of people say there are very three distinct routes. It's research, it's teaching, or it's healthcare, right? And
Yeah,
those kind of
yeah,
the three major routes that you can take. And similar to you, education really wasn't on my mind, but
yeah,
I was definitely pursuing research just like you were. And I
yeah.
definitely can resonate or relate to the degree of knowing myself, knowing my personality, and knowing your personality. Sitting in a lab, right, probably wasn't the most tailored to who we were as people. And so,
Yeah.
speaking for myself, right, that was me. But also, when I think about you, I love how through your navigation of trusting God and praying to God and Him answering in your prayers at different points in your life, He slowly
Mm-hmm.
opened up a pathway for you to find this wonderful after school program that you were able to kind of blend your interest in nature and environment, but also serving students and serving children. Because I think that's a
Mm-hmm.
huge part of your personality as well. You love serving other people and you love being there for other people, and that just really matches how you are in what you're doing currently, and that's being a teacher. So I just love how you said that, and this idea of not knowing the navigation of where you want to go, but also the idea of postgraduate depression or postgraduate anxiety, or this phase that we go through coming out of college of where am I worthy, who is going to see that I'm worthy, and what
Mm-hmm.
is really meant for me in that way. And so
Yeah.
not that I'm I'm obviously not glad that you had to go through that space, right? But I think
Yeah.
such a key or very raw place to be in after postgraduate, especially when you have a faith, because in those moments of uncertainty, you really have to lean on
Hmm.
something that you resonate with. And for you, maybe that was God. For me, that was God. And
Yeah.
for other people, it's other things. And
Yeah.
that's where it should be. But it's reassuring to hear that you've navigated that journey in a way that really put you in a position, even though you had a lot of doubts for yourself, like when you were talking about, do I pursue a master's or do I pursue a
Yeah.
your credential program? But
Yeah.
obviously things are the way that they're supposed to be, and it sounds like you're
Yeah.
happy, which is a great spot or a great place to be in. So I just love
Yeah.
that story that you had for where you are now.
Yeah. Thank you. Something that I just want to point this out, but
Yeah.
for those who might be in post grad or who
Mhm.
are like going through a phase, that post-grad depression or whatever mental health instability I was going through,
Mhm.
I remember distinctly my aggression really peaking, and me and my mom were just fighting the whole time.
Mm.
And I remember in the car, and we're really close, but we're also one of those people that like fight and love at
Yeah.
the same time. They're kind of like my family. But I was in the car, and we had to stop the car because me and my mom got a really bad argument. We just had to stop because I couldn't drive. And I
Wow.
remember my mom just like, she never does this, she really shows her emotion, but she just started like kind of crumbling, and she asked me like, why do you hate me so much? And then I
Wow.
like stopped, and I just started like breaking down, and I remember distinctly, like it just came out, and I said, I'm going to start crying, but I remember I said, I don't hate you, I hate myself, is what I said to that response.
Wow.
And we just had like this conversation of how I've been feeling. I had also something that happened around that time is I had exited a really intense, very short relationship kind of
Mhm.
thing, but it was very traumatic and toxic. And
Yeah.
so I'd left that. I kind of sometimes think that what I had built in college, half of it came down after that.
Mhm.
And so I was back in this state of like, I was seeking validation other places. And so
Mhm.
because I was not fulfilling my parents' dream of after going to a UC, I don't have a job right away. And
Mhm.
they're asking me, are you applying? Are you applying? And I'm not coming up with anything. I just started looking
Yeah.
at myself very differently. Like why can't I get a job? Like, why
Right.
can't I show my parents that the love and effort and time and stress they put into me and the trust they put into me? I can't make anything.
Wow. Wow.
Um, yeah, and I think that was a really like big moment for me to like I think of the story of when I think of my life, I think of two stories. I think of the story of Jacob because there's a verse in the Bible where Jacob says,
Yes.
I'd rather wrestle with you, like to the
Mhm.
angel of God, than
Yeah.
let you go. And that's what I think of with me and God. I'd rather wrestle with him. I'd rather um, fight with him or like have a spiritual argument about what am I supposed to
Mm.
do next? What am I supposed to give up? Than to give him up in my life.
There
So
you
that's one
go.
thing I think of. And then I think of Job. So when
Mhm.
Job gets things taken from him
Right.
because him and God are trying to see, is Job really faithful?
Yeah.
And I think of those moments like when for whatever reason in life, something gets closed, something I really cherish. I have to think of the time like I have to be in my faith and ask God like, is this you? Is this you in action? Like,
Right.
please show me the way. You're the only person that I can really fully like let myself be with.
Mhm.
So please help me to like heal or do whatever I need to do. So those are the
Right.
two stories I think of when I go through not just like post-grad depression, but also like my usual anxiety and
Yeah.
like the other things I deal with in my mental health. Those are two stories I think of that help me to like not get back up, I want to say, because I don't like this
Yeah.
idea of like you have to like get out of it. Not that you have to, but this
Mhm.
idea of like people are pushing you past your comfort zone to just deal
Right.
with it, and that's not healthy.
Mhm.
But this idea of like there's reasons why like you are on this earth, and there are beautiful reasons, and if you are gone,
Yeah.
or if you hate yourself, or you believe that you don't deserve to be here, you're you're gonna miss out on so many beautiful, wonderful things you could have. You miss
Mhm.
out on the opportunities you'll have connecting with others. And I think about that a lot when I go into those dark spaces. Yeah, that took a really interesting turn.
No, that's awesome because I want to touch upon two things from that. And the first one
Mm-hmm.
was this taboo idea of talking about mental health or
Mm,
mental emotional anxiety that you receive after maybe post graduation or that
yeah,
transition that you have from college to whatever you're doing next. And definitely family has a big part of that, right? I think
yeah.
being part of different families or maybe the Phil Am community in general, right? It's maybe taboo to
Mm,
talk about your anxiety or your depression or your mental illness
yeah,
might arise from situations like this. And it's really important that you put that out there because it's a conversation that we need to learn to have with our parents, no matter of what culture that we come from or background that we're
yeah.
a part of. It's what was once taboo should become the norm. And I think normalizing
Mm,
the conversation of this is how I'm feeling and this is how it's affecting my emotional, psychological state, and being very open with our parents about that is super important. I
yeah.
know that we all have our own history and we all have our own trauma and experiences when it comes to having those types of conversations with our parents. But at the same time, once we get older, we start to recognize and understand the shortcomings that can have of not having those type of conversations with our parents, right?
Mm,
And especially
mm,
in a time like this where we need to nudge the older generation or we need to nudge
yeah.
the generations around us so that we can continue to formulate this united front of where do we want to take mental illness issues and where do we want to take the next step of making sure that the next generation is comfortable talking about these once taboo ideas, right? So I think
Yeah.
it really does start with people of our age or people within their 20s to 30s saying, this is a real thing that we're going through. There's research behind it. It's proven and it's something that needs to
Mm,
be recognized and talked about to the point
yeah.
where it's not so much of a discomfort and more of a comfort to talk about, right? Because we come from this place of maybe if I'm talking about my illness or my mental anxiety or whatever, it's shameful or it's putting me at a disadvantage, right? But in a
Mm,
sense, right, we need to shift that conversation so it's allowing us to feel comforted in where we are and how we can grow from that as opposed to backtracking and making ourselves feel worse, if that makes sense. So I love how you
mm,
said that. And that's such a powerful story where you had that moment with your mom of it's not you, it's me. And I think that's really powerful moving forward. And like you said, the story of Job and just this idea of what are you going to do in a crisis or in a crisis of where everything's stripped away from you, where everything is being taken. Who are you going to lean
mm,
to? Are you going to trust in God's work if that's what you believe in? Are you going to trust in a bigger picture or
mm,
right
yeah.
the beautiful things that may come out of your situation, or are you going to fall back and distance yourself, right? And I think that's a very important question that we need to ask ourselves, especially in a time where there's so much uncertainty, there's so much backlash in different areas and so many ways for that we can improve. Are we going to confide in our own feelings and just focus on how we're feeling, or are we going to reach out and extend to
Mm,
different support systems, to different acts of faith, right? And where
mm,
are we going to position ourselves so that we can move forward and ultimately affect the communities that we want to affect? Because our well-being and our spiritual faith and all those different things play a huge play a huge factor in the small spaces that we're part of, in our homes, at work,
mm,
with our friends, right? I know that we're not in all these spaces at once anymore because of the pandemic, but once we start to acclimate to where we are now, we're going to start pushing ourselves or, coming back to these environments and these communities that we were once a part of. And how are we going to rise to the occasion? How are we going to come out of all of this better as better people and more acknowledging of different situations? So I just love those 2 points that you pointed out during your story. It's awesome. So thinking about that and learning more about your story and how far you've come, I know that you've always been a big advocate for the communities that you were a part of, right? Even in the Phil Am communities at Davis or the Filipinx spaces that you're a part of in Davis. And I know that you're fairly active on social media when it comes to sharing resources and information, not just for the Phil Am community, but also for supporting the Black Lives Movement, for example. So
mm.
talk about what pushes you to be an advocate for the spaces that you're a part of.
Ooh, this like goes deep. I think it's so like values. And I do a lot, like me and my friends, and like they're all in different spaces. If you remember Ariana,
Right.
she does like, coaching, life
Right.
coaching, and also she's
Yeah.
doing her own journey. She's getting actually her master's in ed as
Wow.
well, but she's not gonna be a teacher. She's gonna do something else, I think, with it. And I have another friend who wants to be a counselor, and we talk a
Mm-hmm.
lot about like values, community.
There you go.
But I realized that one of the three big values I have, or that I've centered around these days, is knowledge, empathy.
There you go.
There's something else. There's knowledge, empathy. I'm forgetting the third one. Knowledge, empathy. I think it was community. Knowledge,
Mm-hmm.
empathy, and community.
Perfect.
And something I also that kind of extends into it is the idea of accountability.
Yep.
And something I've realized about loving people and
Mm-hmm.
loving communities is it's not just, and it's kind of like having a relationship, and I think it really centers in my relationship with God as well, but just like love isn't just like the happy parts of it. It
Yes.
isn't just,
Yes.
like, so with like Black lives or
Yeah.
Black livelihoods and people, it's not
Yeah.
just, exploiting their, their joy and their
Mhm.
culture,
Right.
It's also recognizing how even we as individuals or our communities or our families, have caused harm. And it's when
Mhm.
I honestly think the world would be better if we realize how accountable we have to be
That's good.
in like everything.
That's good.
Even as like going back to teaching, like accountable for even our own harm against these vulnerable tiny humans. Tiny humans, what my colleague calls them. Like I think of the idea that if someone is harmed, then just so the idea of justice or the idea of righting a wrong and the idea
Yeah.
of healing,
Yeah.
those are really important. But you can't have any of those if the people who have caused harm aren't accountable.
Yeah.
And so I see myself, in this position of like, I'm second generation, I'm Asian American.
Right.
I say probably because my mom's kind of sneaky with her income. She's one of those people, but I think I probably come from like a middle class family, lower middle class, if anything.
Yeah.
Like I have a certain position in society, and I really saw this when I took an Asian American Studies course with Professor Robin Rodriguez, who is at Davis as well. Great professor if you ever get the chance to learn and hear from her or read her resources. But there was a reading from, I think the author is Claire J. Kim, about her triangulation theory. And it was about where, white Americans, where Black Americans, where Asian Americans kind of stand in this like XY axes of, what's it called? Like social class, but also Americanization.
Wow.
And I think we as most Asian Americans, I won't say all because the diaspora is so big, or diaspora. I always get corrected on that. Diaspora is so big, Filipinos and other Southeast Asian families may not relate. But the idea that, some Asian American families are higher up in privilege in terms of financial, and where, in terms of xenophobia, Black Americans may not get the exoticization as much. Unless you're an immigrant, and then it just gets messy. It's complicated because there's so many different backgrounds and things. But what I'm trying to basically say is like I hold a certain position in life, and my privilege may mask the trauma that I cause or I may benefit from for other communities. And a part of transformative justice or healing, especially if I'm going to teach Black and Brown students in LA, is the idea that I have to check my privileges and also understand what like how these things affect my students and also my friends and family, also just people I don't know. If I say like I'm a Christian and I love the people, if I love God's people and everyone is God's people, am I really loving them if I don't speak out about certain things? Will I like Jesus really worked with the people. He worked through his actions. He showed, and I think a lot of the time we say things and it's fluff, and I don't think we think about not just our actions of how they're good, but also how our actions really affect people, how we can participate in microaggressions, but also how we are also harmed. And I think when we are able to both call into people to space, but also and be accountable, I think that is when we truly begin to understand what like practicing allyship is, because you're never going to get it perfect. And so I'm trying to remember the question you asked, but in terms of where does this come from, it's just like, it's not like it's the right thing to do, but if I
Mm-hmm.
am a human being that loves other human beings, like how could I not share? How could I not be, that goes into my value of knowledge. How could I
Yeah.
not bring perspectives of other people, into my
Yeah.
life or into other people's lives and share that this is happening to them, that this is real, I
Mm-hmm.
think of that post I posted of, I honestly don't remember if it's Danielle or Daniela from BMO, and how she like basically quit the dance community because she does not feel safe. She does not
Yeah.
feel like people have her back. And
Yeah.
it's sad because she even said she loves dancing with people, but she
Yes.
won't support a community that won't support her. And I think that's
Mm.
really, like, people need to recognize that, like, Black lives, brown lives, Indigenous lives, you know, they're lives, they're people with fears
Yeah.
and traumas and are affected at a system we may have no idea about. And if we're
Yeah.
gonna call ourselves allies, if we're gonna say we're with you, we gotta, step up. We gotta be accountable for in and outside.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's good. Because even ever since day one of meeting you, right, just being a part of these spaces that I was in with you in back in college, we're dialing it back, right? You're always a big advocate for
Yeah.
those three things that you talked about, right? Knowledge, community, and accountability, right? And when we
Yeah.
transition into this conversation of what we're going through now with racial inequality, right? Accountability is such a huge word that maybe might be underestimated in a sense because in order to be accountable, you have to understand your downfalls, you have to understand your
Yes.
shortcomings, and you have to understand your privilege. And in
Yes.
order to heal, like you said, you use the word healing a lot, you use the word trauma a lot. In order to address this trauma environment that a lot of Black lives are in or brown lives are in, you have to understand this idea of where are you accountable in all of that. Maybe it's
Mm.
not direct, right? In other
Yeah.
spaces, right, microaggressions and in those conversations, it is direct. But in other spaces, where have you been indirectly part of the problem? And I think that's
Yeah.
something that's really important to recognize. And for a lot of us, it does take time processing. And for others, it's
Yeah.
really immediate for where you did wrong or what spaces or what decisions you made to be a part of the communities that you're in. For other people, for Black lives or brown lives, right, Indigenous lives, to feel like they are unsafe in their own spaces, right? And
Yeah.
so it's very important that you understand this idea that we're all accountable, because I loved how you touch upon it. If we're going to call ourselves Christians, if we're going to call ourselves a people of faith, or just, loving people in general, whether you have a faith or
Yeah.
not, how could you not, right? How could you not go out into the world and saying, I've done this harm, or my community has done this harm. How can I
Yes.
do better, right? And that's such a
Yes.
huge part because as Christians, it's one thing to love, right? But it's not always happy, right? It's not always,
Yeah.
rainbows and sprinkles, right?
Yeah.
It's when you
Yeah.
get into the nitty gritty of Jesus's raw love, right? He was honest and he was so pure in his intentions, but it was really hard for people to understand that. And I think that when we're coming in a space that we are now, we need to hear the hard conversations. We need to know where we're
Yeah.
doing wrong and accept those if we definitely want to progress or get better. And so for a
Yeah.
lot of us, we take it personally, but at the same time, we have to
Mm-hmm.
understand, well, we're not the only ones in this world. We're not the only
Yes.
ones going through
Yes.
life along with it. A lot of different communities have been at a disadvantage for a
Yeah.
majority of their lives, and they're still being in that because of the systems that we're in. And so, how do we start
Yeah.
to dismantle that while also knowing this idea of love and forgiveness for one another? That,
Yeah.
yeah, we may forgive one another, and that doesn't always mean that you turned a blind eye,
Mm.
but that also means
Mm.
forgiving is acknowledging where we were a part of, what we were a part of,
Mm.
how we did that, and how am I going to be better? And I think that's a huge part of
Mm.
this conversation of Christians and forgiveness, right? But that's another conversation. But just tying it back to you, I think I love that idea of being an advocate for accountability of being rooted in knowledge. Because if you don't know your
Yeah.
communities, if you don't know your own identity, if you don't know the research behind all these different things, how are you going to provide a space for people to heal from their trauma without offering
Yeah.
them or meeting where they are at, right? So I think
Mm-hmm.
knowledge is a huge part of that. And like you said, everything comes down to relationships. right? Our
Yeah.
relationship with God, our relationship with our family, our
Yeah.
relationship with strangers, and the people that are a part of our lives or not a part of our lives. How are we contributing to those different types of relationships? Because every
Mm-hmm.
relationship is different. And I think it's one
Yeah.
thing that we should always recognize is that our relationships are the purity, or they are the essence of how we continue to move forward as a society, right? If we don't have
Mm-hmm.
good relationships with one another, obviously we're just going to we're at a stalemate all the time. But if we
Mm-hmm.
consistently think about, how am I going to grow my relationship with one another, how am I going to provide a space where, if I am privileged in whatever X, Y, and Z, how am I going to understand that privilege and not contribute to this conversation of, I'm better, the system plays me better, knowing that we all need to be part of this same equity, in a sense of the different opportunities that we have and the way that we're uplifting and dismantling different institutions. But how are we
Mm.
going to do that with a strong relationship with one another? All of it comes down to the
Yeah.
people that we're next to, the people that we work with, the people that we call our friends or our family. If we call them friends or family, it all comes down to, what type of relationship are you willing to sacrifice to preserve that relationship? So I think that's
Mm.
really important. And I just love how you've always been consistently trying to do that, Mona. And that's something that I really appreciate that you're doing, not just for the spaces that you're in now, but for the students that you're lifting up. So it's awesome.
Thanks. Yeah.
So I guess to add on to that, right, I love picking your brain about, being a new teacher. I think I was
Yeah.
I was once in your spot not too long ago, just a couple years ago. But you work with sixth graders, I work with seventh graders. They're similar enough, but also dissimilar in a sense. So I want to hear
I get
from
what you
you.
mean, though. I get
You
what you
understand
mean.
what I mean?
There's
Like,
something that happens between the two. Like,
yep,
seventh and eighth are kind of like okay, but like sixth and seventh, they like kind of different. But
yeah.
yeah, I get you. I get you.
Definitely. I think it's not something that I really recognized when I was younger, not even just in middle school or in high school or in college.
Yeah.
It's when you're a teacher, it's a whole different level. But so
Mm-hmm.
what does it mean for you to be able to nurture the minds of your sixth graders and kind of the challenges that come along with that?
Yeah. So, that's like a good nurture. I I'm still, so I'm in this interesting spot where I'm doing like an internship credential kind of
Right.
thing where I'm technically working as I'm getting my credential. So it puts me in a very interesting spot where like I can practice and critique my pedagogy as I'm driving so I think a
Yeah.
lot of the like building the train while I drive it kind of
Yes.
vibe.
Yes.
But I think about this idea of nurture, and I don't, recognizing that my students are still children though, I also recognize that they're individuals, and
Yeah.
I don't want to cheat them from the idea that just because they're young, they need to be like nested, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I just want to shift my thought process to building community with them.
There you
So
go.
that's, I think, what I would describe nurture.
Mhm.
I forgot the original question, so I don't want to go on a train thought. Can you remind me what your original main
Yeah.
topic
No.
was?
How
I
do
know
you?
I'm going to out of here.
That's one of the best parts of this, though. But how do you? What does it mean for you to nurture the minds of
Mm,
your sixth graders?
yeah. So okay, I was on the right track. I just
Yeah, you were.
got
You were.
lost for a bit. So building community is really important. Making in our school, we're practicing a new like terms of like steps, but this idea of like feeling safe. No, really, I think I forgot if belonging or safety comes first. I think belonging
Hmm.
comes first. Feeling
Yeah.
belong, then feeling safe,
Yeah.
then feeling like going up the steps to this idea that you are able to learn and to build community in a
Ableism. Yeah.
learning environment.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's kind of what I want in my classroom. I'm a human being, they're a human being. Sure, I think Emden Christopher Emden does, I think it's Christian or Christopher Emden, but he's a Black man, science educator. He does TED Talks and stuff. He has a great book. But he talks about the idea of being a master of content in one of his
Mm.
TED Talks. That we are masters of, like, yeah, we're teachers, but technically we're just like, we should be thinking of it as like we're we're guides of content, and they are the masters of their own learning. They know how to
Hmm.
learn on their own. We
Right.
can guide them, we can give them scaffolds and modeling and all that, but in the end, just like we decide what works best for us, they're going to decide what works best for them. And we have to observe that and communicate with them with that, give them the space to be safe enough to say, hey, I want you as my teacher to be accountable for my learning.
Yes.
This isn't working for me. And so I want to create that kind of space where I'm not like, I think teachers need to realize, think about accountability, how much power we have.
Definitely.
Something I think we really need to think about. Our actions and our words hold so much power in over our students' lives. Like one little like snap or like remark can change their entire day. Sometimes like a couple days with us.
Yeah.
And I think when we build community, it's important that we have to check ourselves at the door. Are we taking care of ourselves enough so that we don't become, you know, when we're in the state where we lose control? Do we say, do we try and grasp for control more over our students, or do we even question, why do I need to be in control? Not like let's let the chaos happen.
Right.
Sometimes they're like that, and sometimes they just beautifully orchestrate chaos somehow. I am not at that level yet at all. So those teachers who can do that are like chef's kiss magical. But I guess that's what I'm trying to say is like nurturing students, nurturing a human being. It's like it's connection. No one's gonna want to learn from someone they don't like, you know, or not that they don't like, but they can't like really
connect with.
Yeah. This is actually something we talked about in a meeting recently. Like, students won't really want to open up or do those like type like activities unless they get to know us and who we are. Yeah. So in my classroom, I try and do like little drawing times, or I like dance with my plants, or I like sing a ukulele song. I just try to put moments that like, or I just tell them like, hey, you didn't do your work? That's cool. I didn't do my work for school either. So we're on the same boat. We still got to be accountable. And they're like, oh, like Miss isn't like a perfect human being. Like, yeah. There's those moments of like raw human moments. Yeah, that really are really important, at least for me in my classroom.
It all comes down to this idea of relationships, right? Because if you're not forming this relationship with your students, if you're not forming this relationship with your coworkers or your family members, then your connection is going to be off, right? And that's pretty intuitive. But then into the deeper side of that, right? If we cannot see each other's imperfections, if we can't see each other's shortcomings and be loving and accepting of those, then there's this facade of putting up for our students that we always need to be perfect, or that we always need to have things together, or we always need to be control. When in reality, right, if you have a background of faith, you're never in control in a sense of this bigger picture, right? There's always something that's going to be shifting or changing in your life where you need to surrender that idea of control, right? But even if you're not of faith, right, we're never always in control. Learning to be in the back seat or in the passenger seat of this thing called life, right? I think it's really important to acknowledge that without acknowledging relationships, without understanding this deeper sense of connection, without understanding this reassurance or this comfort in your shortcomings or in your downfalls or in your in your insecurities, then all of those are connected in a way of how you're going to play in your character for other people, right? Because if you're really confident in your insecurities and you allow that to feed into where you want to grow in the growth areas you are, then you're going to start building connections with the people that will help you get there. And by building in those connections, you're forming a relationship. And that ties exactly back to students, right? Showing them to understand it's okay not to know everything. It's okay not to have everything figured out. It's okay to be a part of trauma and in these different spaces. But understanding that those insecurities, understanding those problems or those issues are a part of who we are, right? Whether we like it or not. But how are we going to use that as a way that feeds into empowerment, that feeds into a way of inspiration, not just for us, but for maybe our friends or peers or your fellow classmates, right? Being, finding a process, finding a support system, whether it's teachers, administration, family members, that are going to help you heal from those issues, but also how are we going to use this as a way to make us stronger, right? As cliche as
Yeah.
it sounds, right? Finding our strength in our weaknesses. But it's very true, and especially for our students, when trying to build connections, when trying to build relationships, it really comes down to not just knowing who they are, what favorite color or what favorite food that they like, but who are they in their lives outside of a student, right? I feel like a lot of us get
Mhm.
caught up in this idea that I need to know everything about my student. You don't need to know everything about your student. You just need to know the things that they want to talk about hours and hours and hours about. Because kids don't,
Mhm.
maybe some kids don't want to talk about their favorite food, their favorite pet for hours on end. But once you
Mhm.
start opening up to them, maybe they'll want to talk about what is it like to live at home? What is it like to go into these different spaces where they feel safe going to the park, or right, things that make
Yeah.
them who they are outside of school. And that's
Yeah.
where this driven connection comes with. And it really comes down
Yeah.
to also, doesn't matter if you're a teacher or not, right? How are you going to understand the people that you're constantly with, in a sense, outside of your circle that you have with them, right? Maybe it's your coworker, maybe it's your boss, maybe it's your
Mhm.
family members, right? You know them on the surface level, but in order to really heal from the traumas that we're a part of, in order to build this idea of relationships, in order
Mhm.
to become better people, we need to understand the people that we're with on a deeper level. And that means understanding them in a context outside of what you're already used to. And a
Mhm.
lot of that has to do with, understanding who you are so that you can have those types of conversations with people. So that's really important for
Mhm.
you to talk about.
Mhm. Mhm.
Mona, a lot of good things today. I love how we transitioned from your faith when it comes to leaning into God post graduation, when it came to leaning into the different spaces of who you were and complementing
Mhm.
that into your lifestyle as a rising educator, as also a student,
Mhm.
but also just a person that's part of so many different communities and will always be. So I'm going to put you in a situation and I just want you to respond with a simple statement. Sounds good?
Okay.
All
Okay.
right. So you have the chance to time travel 10 years from now, all right, at some random time in the future to see your future self. You get to a point where you see your future self. What do you hope to see in your life and why?
Wait, if I hold on, I got confused at the direction of time I'm traveling. Am I traveling backward or forward?
You're traveling forward 10 years down the
Okay.
future. Yes. Sorry if
I
I
don't know
wasn't clear.
why I thought of backward. No, I think
No.
that was a me. That was a me. That was a me. But forward 13. So I said I was sorry. My mind is still thinking backwards. 2023 going to 33. So 10 years from now, I hope to see myself in a place of balance.
That's good.
Yeah. I don't know. Did you want more? Did you just want the
You can
simple
you can
statement?
elaborate. Yeah, what
Um,
does balance look like to you?
man, I think see, the thing is, I don't know if I'm ever gonna have balance.
Hmm,
But I think the
interesting.
thing that's always been in my life is this idea of constant change or constant
Hmm.
movement.
Right.
And I'm a lot better about it. Or some people maybe people in my close life will argue not really, but I feel like I've gotten a lot better about it. I feel
Yeah.
like I've been more healthy in terms of my work life balance. But I wish to achieve balance. I wish to kind of, not that I'm never gonna stop learning about how to be a teacher, but I just
Hmm.
hope I like, maybe this first year is so hard, but like just like get to a place where like I'm not I don't want to say comfortable, but I have more confidence as a teacher enough
Yeah.
to have like a foundation for my pedagogy, but something that is flexible and always willing to change for like my students. And
Hmm.
I think what I mean by balance is in my life that I hope that I find the things that I'm looking for, like in terms of like relationships, in terms of like my own stability, in terms of where I want to be for my communities,
Right.
in terms of the time I make for myself to be growing as a human being. I hope
Yeah.
I find that balance by 33. That's what I'm hoping for.
This idea of balance, right? I think it's very common for a lot of 20 to 30-year-olds to understand or come to understand this idea. What does balance mean in our lives? And maybe that means balance in your workplace. Maybe that means balance in your health and your your eating habits. Maybe that's balance in your familial relationships of being able to connect with one another, whether we have right trauma or not. This idea of balance is so important because we always want to be grounded in something. We always want to have confidence in something. And so it's very important that we want to recognize that balance should be part of the end goal. It should be part of something that becomes normal in our life, especially in a crazy society that we live in today. So definitely something that we're all hoping for. Definitely something that I hope for myself in the future too, 10 years down the line, is this idea of balance in who I am, balance in my confidence as whatever direction God takes me in. But I think for everyone else, just finding this balance in who you are. So that's a good theme to take away from this. Mona, thank you so much for taking the time today out of your crazy teacher schedule. I always appreciate the talks like these and all of the knowledge that I absorb from it. And it's really nice catching up. So thank you so much, Mona.
Thank you. It's so fun catching up. Yeah, it's a great time. Here for it.
For everyone else, thank you so much for tuning in. Like I said, support the channel, download this episode. Both really appreciate that. Until the next time, Mona, I'll see you.
Bye.
Bye.